I want to talk about Whoopi Goldberg because I got so many texts this week because she attacked me the week before.
Sure.
So everybody was like, oh, Bill, I get you're enjoying the karma. First of all, I'm going to talk about this at the end of my show next week, teaser. But there is no thing as karma, okay? Get over that. Whoopi attacks me on a regular basis. She says stupid on a regular basis. They just happen to coincide.
Sausage maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City.
Whoopi Goldberg just went full meltdown mode. And no, it had nothing to do with cold lattes or camera angles. Bill Maher and Greg Gutfeld teamed up for a verbal roast so brutal, it left Whoopi's legacy smoldering in its seat. What exactly did they say that pushed The View's reigning queen into meltdown territory? Let's just say when the dust settled, even her Oscar looked ready to walk off the shelf. Buckle up, because this takedown wasn't petty, it was legendary.
It's so cute when one of their side gets punished. They sulk like they ran out of raw cookie dough in the green room. Yeah, ABC suspended Whoopi for 2 weeks because she said the Holocaust had nothing to do with race. She said this on a show called The View, which makes everything about race. Except now.
The Holocaust isn't about race. No. It's not about race.
Ethnicity.
It's about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
Yeah, that's heroically stupid.
Whoopi Goldberg, long the self-declared monarch of daytime discourse, has ruled The View like it's her personal kingdom, where every guest gets grilled, every opinion comes with extra sass, and no take is too wild to wave around like a flag. But recently, that empire cracked. In a moment so chaotic it could shake the throne, Whoopi wasn't the wise oracle at the table. She was the stunned target. And the culprits? None other than Bill Maher and Greg Gutfeld, two verbal snipers who turned daytime's queen into a deer in headlights.
The liberal privilege, Whoopi hangs on, which is fine since she apologized, but not before digging an even deeper hole than the one in her head.
And finally, new rule. Stop saying that Whoopi Goldberg getting yanked from The View right after she attacked me on The View is karma. There's no such thing as karma. Sorry. Sorry, but life is random. The only word to describe it when a big game hunter gets trampled by an elephant and then eaten by lions is hilarious.
Because instead of coming off as insightful or even remotely balanced, Whoopi's monologue crashed headfirst into a wall of irony. Here she was, the same woman who's built a career on gatekeeping what opinions are acceptable, suddenly waxing poetic about open dialogue and tolerance. It was like a hall monitor preaching anarchy. You could almost hear the collective eye-roll echo across the studio. And that's when Bill Maher and Greg Gutfeld, never ones to pass up a slow pitch, stepped in with precision.
That not everyone on that platform or who consumes stuff on that platform enjoys. And The View is a particularly weird place to do a cancellation.
It's called The View?
It's called The View. It's not called The Facts.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that it's called, I don't think they meant this when Barbara Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's The View.
Well,
that's the problem in America. There is one view,
right, and
one
that's clearly
true opinion, and everybody else can go sit in the corner.
That's correct.
And that's exactly when Bill Maher, with his trademark smirk, pounced. Not with rage, but with razor-sharp wit. He called out the glaring contradiction of Whoopi preaching free speech while routinely shutting down dissent on her own show. Greg Gutfeld didn't miss a beat either, piling on with his usual mix of sarcasm and surgical jabs, painting Whoopi not as a fearless commentator, but as a gatekeeper of double standards. By the time they were done, Whoopi wasn't steering the conversation. She was clinging to the wreckage of her credibility, caught in a storm of her own making.
Yesterday on The View, otherwise known as Hell's DMV, Whoopi Goldberg asked how much different are the values of the Trump administration from the Taliban.
We have a leader who has repeatedly demeaned women, wants to defund organizations that benefit women, calling on the media to shut up,
specifically wants to give preferential treatment based on religion. Are these values really much different than the Taliban's?
Wow. Talk about groundbreaking to actually hear a celebrity say something mean about the Taliban. How dare they compare them to Trump? The Taliban should sue. Guess they ran out of Hitler analogies. So as they bash the president, I'm reminded how entertainers rarely express any rage over any strand of misogynist Islamism. If they did, we might take their rage toward Trump seriously. A reminder, the Taliban throw acid in girls' faces for going to school. Yeah, I guess that's like defunding Planned Parenthood.
And that's when Greg Gutfeld jumped into the ring like a late-night assassin, armed with punchlines instead of punches. Where Maher dissects with wit, Gutfeld detonates with glee, and Whoopi never saw it coming. He didn't just call out her contradictions, he stacked them like Jenga blocks and dared her to touch them. She talks about tolerance but interrupts every opposing view. She champions open dialogue but shuts down anyone who dares challenge her script. Gutfeld, with his usual grin that knows something you don't, pointed out the obvious. Whoopi's version of discourse sounds more like a monologue dressed in applause. The audience didn't erupt. They froze. Because there's something uniquely brutal about watching someone who's used to controlling the room suddenly lose it. Whoopi tried to pivot, tried to shift the tone to victimhood, the oldest play in the daytime TV handbook, but Maher and Gutfeld weren't buying. They didn't yell, they didn't flinch. They just let her unravel, word by word, until the only thing left standing was her reputation. Wobbly and unsupported, like a cardboard cutout in a hurricane.
I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bill Maher, who has been the standard bearer for liberalism and in many ways leftism until the woke went bananas in this last decade, but for decades, that's what this guy has represented in America. I want you to note the tone they all talk with him. I want you to look at Sonny Hostin's body language and the way they look at him and everything else, just because he is a lefty who hasn't gone completely bananas.
Gutfeld took one look at Whoopi's feeble attempts to maintain some shred of dignity and went for the jugular. He wasn't interested in engaging in some high-minded philosophical debate. He just wanted to watch her squirm. Every time she tried to pivot or deflect, he expertly parried with a zinger that cut deeper than the last. His specialty? Turning her carefully crafted moral superiority into something laughable. Whoopi tried to play it off like she was still in control, but Gutfeld's humor hit harder than her usual rhetorical flourishes. He didn't need to make an argument. He just turned her words into a punchline. He dragged her moral high ground through the mud, twisting her own contradictions until she looked more like a political punchline than a seasoned TV personality. And the crowd, they couldn't get enough of it. Gutfeld's ruthless humor was a spectacle, and Whoopi's frustration was as clear as day. As each joke landed, her composure cracked just a little more. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was an execution of her credibility, with Gutfeld leading the charge like a comedy sniper. By the time they were done, Whoopi didn't have much left to say. She had been taken apart by two of the sharpest minds on TV, each one delivering their blows in a way that left her gasping for air. The queen of daytime TV had been reduced to a footnote, her dignity shattered by the very people she thought she could lecture.
By the way, out there, that hat that you keep wearing, that red hat that says Make America Great Again, that tells people that you go along with this. So you might as well just put a swastika on the hat.
Don't do that. Let's not do that.
Because we see it anyway.
I'm not going to defend Donald Trump ever, but I would never say that we should put the swastika on the cap, because I think you can hate Donald Trump. You can't hate everybody who likes him. It's half the country. I don't want to live in that country. I don't want to live in the country where I hate half the country, and I don't hate half the country.
How dare you disagree with me?
Gutfeld's specialty was never just about the facts. It was about the delivery. He had a knack for turning the most mundane political debates into comedic gold. And when he turned his sights on Whoopi, it was like he had stumbled upon the perfect target. Her opinions weren't just wrong. They were laughably misguided, and Gutfeld was more than ready to turn that into pure entertainment. He didn't need to dig into the substance of her arguments like Bill Maher had. Gutfeld didn't even bother to argue the facts. Instead, he effortlessly dismantled Whoopi with humor, reducing her to a caricature of herself. With each sarcastic remark, it wasn't just her ideas that were being mocked. It was her very presence, her aura of authority that had been the backbone of her daytime TV persona. It was the sort of humiliation that made Whoopi's carefully constructed liberal righteousness seem ridiculous. Gutfeld's jokes were the kind that didn't require a college degree to appreciate. They were accessible, cutting, and biting. And the timing? Perfection. Whoopi couldn't even recover, not when Gutfeld was just as content making her the butt of a joke than trying to engage with her ideas. As if it couldn't get worse, Gutfeld's jokes didn't stay confined to the TV screen. The internet devoured them, adding fuel to the fire and turning Whoopi's downfall into an online spectacle. Everyone who watched The View couldn't help but laugh and think the same thing. Whoopi was done.
Their brains are small. But who's the dumbest one of all? True, none of them are in Mensa, but who's the most densa? Perhaps it's Sonny who mastered the art of making idiots look smart. Now, The View could ask a mirror who's the dumbest one of all, but there's no way that glass doesn't shatter.
But let's not just focus on the destruction. Let's take a moment to appreciate Whoopi's valiant attempt at defending herself. Did she go into full meltdown mode? Absolutely. And who could blame her? She's been the face of daytime television for decades, and now she was being publicly roasted by two guys who practically live for this kind of thing. There was no graceful comeback, no smooth exit, just a lot of defensive babbling, some eye rolls, and a desperate attempt to save face. Whoopi, who had spent years as the queen of TV debates, was now on the receiving end of a roast she hadn't prepared for. Her usual tactic of acting like she didn't care just wasn't cutting it this time. You could practically see the frustration bubbling up on her face. This wasn't just a typical debate. This was a full-on attack, and her usual confidence was crumbling. This was the moment her empire was falling apart, and she had no idea how to stop it. The real fun begins when you zoom out and take a good look at the bigger picture. This wasn't just some petty little TV spat. It was the collision of comedy, politics, and ego, all coming together in a beautiful, ironic explosion. Bill Maher, the poster child for old-school liberalism, was holding the line against the so-called woke warriors, while Whoopi Goldberg, a staunch believer in progressive orthodoxy, was trying to preach the gospel of kindness and political correctness. The tension between these two forces was palpable, and watching it all unfold in real time was like witnessing the collapse of a well-oiled machine.
Those hens are always clucking. They get to say stupid stuff for an hour every day, and then I get to say stupid stuff for an hour every day, except on purpose. But every now and then, one of those dingbats inadvertently says something that reveals modern liberal thought so perfectly it deserves further study. You know, like a weird serpent that washed up on the beach and you want to poke it with a stick.
Then, to throw a little spice into the mix, we have Greg Gutfeld, who's made a career out of weaponizing satire to expose the absurdity of the left. It's like watching the ideological equivalent of a street brawl, except with way more sarcasm and fewer punches. What this reveals is fascinating. Even among entertainers, the tribal lines are drawn with blood. We've got Bill Maher, who probably thinks the world was better when you could smoke a cigarette and crack a joke without someone's feelings getting hurt. Then there's Whoopi, clinging to a version of liberalism that hasn't evolved since, well, the 90s. And Gutfeld? He's sitting back like the proud general of the Fox News army, weaponizing satire as his sword of choice. It's like an ideological war broke out on the set of The View, and nobody told Whoopi that the battle had already moved on from her tired, liberal talking points. This clash is playing out on the public stage, where people are growing more and more tired of echo chambers. We're in a moment where viewers are looking for debates, not monologues. They want their politics served with a side of humor, some criticism, and a touch of actual insight. Not just a big old bowl of, agree with me or you're canceled. So, while Whoopi is sitting pretty in her liberal echo chamber, thinking she's the voice of reason, Bill Maher and Greg Gutfeld are giving the audience what they really crave. A real discussion.
Happy Wednesday, everyone. Well, not if you're Whoopi Goldberg, a.k.a. Karen Johnson. Yeah, who knew Whoopi was a Karen? I thought that was only for white people, like Toyota Priuses and skiing.
Maher is basically saying, yes, I'm a liberal, but come on, this is getting out of hand. Meanwhile, Gutfeld's turning every liberal talking point into a joke. And we're here for it. Here's where it gets even more delicious. The View has become a symbolic representation of resistance to criticism. It's the fortress where liberals go to escape the haters and give their unchallenged opinions. Whoopi, the queen of that fortress, has been hiding behind her years of TV cred, convinced she can never be taken down. But here's the twist. Maher and Gutfeld, who you'd think are the outcasts in this game, ironically end up as the champions of calling it out. They're like the cool kids in high school who actually make the effort to question everything, including each other's absurdities. In this bizarre twist, Whoopi's fall from grace becomes the symbol of a much bigger battle, one where we actually need to talk about these issues and stop shouting at each other from our corners. Now, let's talk about the aftermath and who really won this battle. Bill Maher's looking pretty good right now. His credibility has been elevated to new heights among centrists and critics of political correctness. Maher's been on the front lines, calling out the absurdity of woke culture while still keeping his liberal roots intact. He's managed to be the guy who isn't afraid to roast the left, and now his audience is growing because people are finally starting to realize he's the voice of reason in a world full of moral panic.
So that makes Sunny Hostin, who thinks climate change caused the solar eclipse, the dumbest of them all. Because everyone knows the moon caused the eclipse, which is controlled by The View's gravitational pull.
Then there's Greg Gutfeld, who's quietly watching the rise of his late
night influence from the comfort of his Fox News throne. He took down Whoopi with all the finesse of a lion playing with its food. But the best part? His takedown trended beyond just Fox News audiences. It was like watching a comedian do a one-man show that suddenly becomes a viral sensation. Whoopi's debate was trending on Twitter for days, and Gutfeld's sharp, witty commentary turned his late-night slot into the cool new place to be. His reach expanded faster than the audience at a South Park marathon. As for Whoopi, she's still holding strong on The View, clinging to that high horse, acting like the world hasn't changed. But you can't help but notice that her public image took a little hit. She's been knocked down a peg, and her credibility as the spokesperson for Reason has taken a serious blow. It's not like she's completely irrelevant. The View isn't about to fire her, at least not yet. But her aura of untouchability? Gone. Poof. Like a magician pulling a disappearing act on stage. Except this time, the audience knows exactly how the trick works. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some quiet talk behind the scenes. One fictionalized insider puts it perfectly. She's not untouchable anymore. In other words, Whoopi's been knocked off her pedestal. While she might still be queen of the View Castle, she's no longer the unchallenged ruler of the liberal debate. She's just another celebrity trying to navigate a culture that's tired of the echo chamber. And in the world of media, that's a dangerous place to be. But perhaps the most tragic part of this entire disaster was how Whoopi responded. Instead of using the same sharp wit and intellectual chops that made her famous in the first place, she resorted to the one thing she's always relied on, pretending to be above it all. Whoopi's breakdown, her meltdown, it was everywhere. In the end, Whoopi Goldberg learned a valuable lesson. Never, ever underestimate the power of Bill Maher and Greg Gutfeld when they team up. This wasn't just a roast. This was an absolute masterclass in making someone look completely and utterly ridiculous. And Whoopi, well, she might never be the same again. The queen of The View just got dethroned by a couple of guys who made sure the whole world saw her breakdown in real time.